In the recently passed Farm Bill, Congress included a revision to the Healthy Forest Reserve Program. This topic came up at the Idaho Forest Restoration Partnership. The program offers another source of financing for forest restoration, and it has a significant potential impact in Idaho and other states across the country. So this video is a summary first of the features of this section of the Farm Bill, and then I'm going to show you some map examples of candidate areas to be considered as what are termed designated landscapes. So what's changed in the revision? I think first eye-opener is that Congress authorized up to $200 million a year to treat national forest land within landscapes that have declining forest health, and this extends from the current fiscal year 2014 through fiscal year 2024. And the way it works is each governor of the 50 states can submit requests to the Secretary of Agriculture. These requests are to designate specified landscapes as landscape scale treatment areas. The deadline for this request is a short-term one. It's April 7th, 2014. Now, the law does say that there can be requests that come in afterwards, but I think the writing between the lines is that it's to the state's benefit to turn in these requests by April 7th. The projects within these landscapes, subsequently, the projects that are proposed within these landscapes go through a public scoping process, but they qualify for a categorical exclusion. So this was really consistent with the workshop's theme this past week on accelerating forest restoration in Idaho. What's the scale? Well, in terms of landscape, this legislation considers 6-level watersheds as a landscape, and projects can be up to 3,000 acres. And these are all treatments that would occur on national forest lands. Now, what qualifies? Well, there are 3 biggies. One is declining forest health. Some measure of conditions have declined in the landscape. An indication that there is a risk of substantially increased tree mortality over the next 15 years due to the current conditions, or that there is a risk of hazard trees posing risk to the public, either to infrastructure, to the public health, or public safety. There are some sideboards. Interesting one at the very beginning of this slide is that there must be a collaborative process or a qualified RAC is required. And the dollars can be used to implement part of a qualified CLFR proposal. So when we think of the Weiser Little Salmon headwaters, I think that is definitely an area that qualified as a CLFR proposal, and we should be giving consideration to 6-level watersheds within it. Also, another sideboard is that the treatments need to maximize retention of old growth and large trees. A couple of qualifiers there: as appropriate by forest type, but also the treatments need to promote stands that are resilient to insects and disease. And then the project proposals need to consider the best available scientific information to either maintain or restore ecological integrity. No new permanent roads are allowed with the use of these funds, so it is similar to CFLRP in that respect. And by the end of the project, there's a commitment to decommission within 3 years following completion of the project any temporary roads. The law also specifies certain data sources. How do you provide some sort of a standard across the country for what qualifies as a declining forest condition or conditions that are at a high risk of mortality over the next 15 years. Well, these are the data sources that are referenced in the legislation. The annual Department of Agriculture's forest health surveys, so that is one that's important to consider. The 2012 National Insect and Disease Map. This is a map that's produced nationally. Outside the wildland-urban interface, there is a requirement that fire regime condition class maps need to be used. And then the wildland-urban interface is definitely a consideration with respect to the threat to human safety, public safety, and the public's infrastructure. So I'm going to give you some examples of these data sources within the Weiser Little Salmon headwaters area. Before reviewing the data sources within the Weiser Little Salmon headwaters area, I think it's important to understand the timeline and constraints that we're under for this program. But here, in summary, is I think what everyone agreed to at the IFRP workshop with respect to the role of collaboratives at this stage. The groups will work with the Forest Service to recommend treatment areas, these landscapes. Remember, these are in general 6-level watersheds. And they need to, the forests need to provide these candidate landscapes to IDL by March 7th in order for them to get everything prepared for a review by the governor's staff and submission to the Secretary of Agriculture by April 7th. And that, with the time involved, it's just not feasible to design projects within the landscape. So I think that's clearly a subsequent step. And this is just a reminder again that in the development of those projects, they can be up to 3,000 acres in size, and that's 3,000 acres of national forest ownership. So hopefully that's a little bit of a motivator for why the coalition should be involved now, and that's part of the decision is to determine if you want to be involved in this, but at the same time consider the potential impact in the context of the dollars that are available in order to finance continued restoration work. For orientation within the Payette Forest Coalition's CFLR area, the Weiser Little Salmon headwaters, that is this outline here in the light color. Within that area, there's about 900,000 acres, but the Forest Service ownership is, in round figures, is about 500,000 acres. These lighter boundaries are the 3 current project areas. Milk Creek Council Mountain has a record of decision and contracts underway. Lost Creek, Boulder Creek, located at the northern part here, is a draft EIS has been published and reviewed, and a draft FEIS and draft record of decision is coming in March. And then the third area, located down in through here, is about a 50,000 acre area that would be project number 3, and the coalition is just in the stages of developing recommendations for that. So within this area, what does the data tell us about the current forest health, and does it help identify some potential landscapes? Again, 6-level watersheds in terms of this legislation that should be considered as designated treatment areas. I'm starting out with the data from the National Composite Insect and Disease Risk Map. All the areas that are in green are forested. The red areas are, the legend indicates that they have greater than 25% projected mortality. So I think that means over the next 15 years. Now, I'm I'm assuming that the light red and dark red is just due to draping the data on top of a shaded relief image. So I think all of those are areas that have a relatively high risk of projected mortality. So that's one consideration. A different way of reviewing that is data that was provided by the Forest Service, which ranks watersheds by the hazard for basal area loss. And this one's pretty interesting when you look at it, because these two higher classes are the top 5%, the highest estimated loss, and that would be this area, kind of in the north central portion of the Weiser Little Salmon headwaters. And then the next lower category, 75 to 95%, is a good share of the whole CFLR landscape. So two different ways to look at forest health. This is a loss hazard at a watershed scale, and then the previous one was the risk in terms of the projected mortality being at least 25%, greater than or equal to 25%. One of the other data sources that was referenced was the Department of Agriculture's annual damage assessment flights. These light green polygons are areas that showed up in the 2013 flight as areas that have suffered damage due to either insects or disease. So another indicator of forest health conditions. And then the last data source is the wildland-urban interface areas, and IDL provided this data of the areas that they have used statewide in the development of Idaho's forest management strategy, and all of these areas are what they apply for a wildland-urban interface. One of the other features that I mentioned several times in this discussion was the sixth order watersheds for the Healthy Forest Reserve program. These are the boundaries that are considered landscapes. So each one of these areas bounded by the light gray is a 6-level watershed. So if we keep that in mind and then go back to the composite insect and disease risk map, provide an idea of the relative risk or relative potential for these 6-level watersheds to be considered as a treatment area. Those light gray boundaries are a little tough to see with the risk map background, so I'm just displaying it here with a darker, wider line. But again, each one of these is for the Healthy Forest Reserve program a landscape, and you can see by the results of the 2012 risk map, there's a great deal of variation in terms of the proportion of the area that is considered at risk. But this would be another data source to consider within these boundaries in order to designate some candidate areas. I believe as we get up northwest of Boulder Creek, we're into a roadless area, so that's another factor to consider, that even though the vegetation conditions are there to be a risk factor, it's probably unlikely that there would be mechanical treatment based on the coalition's past discussions of activity within inventoried roadless areas. There are several 6-level watersheds that would be good candidates to recommend as treatment areas. And this is just a quick review to give you an idea of what data needs to be incorporated in the review, and we'll need to get additional comments and background from the ID teams that know this area much better than a simple eyeball overview. So in summary, I think there's a real short timeline here. The forest will need to submit to IDL the forest will need to submit to IDL candidate landscapes to be considered within the state of Idaho as designated treatment areas. Those will be submitted to the governor's office and then to the Secretary of Agriculture. And I think that sets the stage for later projects, the development of purpose and need for subsequent projects that could treat these areas with, again, the additional sideboards, but treat these areas within a categorical exclusion. So I hope this has helped for our upcoming meeting on the 25th to at least give you some background so that we don't have to take the time on Tuesday to go through the background and can discuss the implications and the preference from the PAED Coalition members on pursuing this opportunity further.